Trisha, hello.
Hello, I'm so excited to be doing this actually.
Well,
I am.
it's a lovely moment. We've known each other for kind of 6, 7 months. I've been on your show, and you said, "Hang on a minute, when am I going to come on yours?" So, ta-da! Here we are. And you're wearing your pink outfit. I'm glad we didn't clash. Let's start with your first track. I want to ask you all the questions in all of the world. You're the most amazing person. What should we go with first on your Pride playlist?
I've got you two, a man and a woman. I love this song. I think you can make a mini movie from it, but behind it, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, is another completely different story. It's well, some of the work of a childhood friend. Back in the old days, growing up, I grew up in Virginia Water in Surrey, and he grew up in Egham or Englefield Green, not far from me. He went to Strode's, I went to Sir William Perkins. They were both then private schools, or selective grammar schools, we should say. And we moved in the same circles. I was in an all-girl band. He was in a band with his brother. So it's Steve Lillywhite. And Steve Lillywhite went on to be a world-famous Grammy-winning producer of records. But he was one of my first boyfriends. And we've remained very close friends ever since.
And he
So
literally is
that's
responsible for, well, so many legendary records, isn't he? And sounds and working with different artists.
When I first met him, I would have been 14. He would have been 16 or 17. We wore platform shoes then. And I remember going to see, I think we went to see XTC. No, we went to see 10cc in their early days in a hall. And we were lying snogging. That's what they used to call it, snogging.
Heavy petting.
And I had this handbag with my money because I came from a very blue collar background. Well, both my parents were mental health nurses and we lived in tied housing. And I had a Saturday job at Woolies and I had my pay packet in my little handbag and somebody nicked it. And Steve and I both always remember that, but we still talk. We're still really good friends. He now lives in Bali. And a lot of people sort of poo-pooed that he went over to Asia to do all this K-pop stuff, and he did a collaboration with Kentucky, and everyone's like, ooh, like that. But of course, K-pop and Indonesian and Asian pop is massive. So Steve always manages to do. He doesn't care, Steve. He does what he loves doing and works with artists. In lots of different genres. So yeah, he just built an amazing house. He's called the Lily Pad. You know, I've known his kids. I know his ex-wife still, Patty, who lives in New York, not far from me. So that's one of the many reasons that I chose this YouTube track.
And tell me the track, and tell me the reason why you want this particular track, Trisha.
Well, a man and a woman, it's more the way it goes and the soaring sort of background and what have you. I don't know, it was just all dreamy because it was in How to Dismantle the Atomic Bomb. And I think most of the songs in there, if I can stick my neck out, are quite sort of conventionally masculine. But this one was a bit more floaty, which just on my running list because I used to be a trail runner and cross-country runner when I lived in Norfolk, and it was just one of those songs on my running list where I could slow down.
Dusty Springfield. We'll go straight into this next song. This was like, so let me ask you, I always remember when this came out, late 80s. What was Trisha doing at the point of the late 80s, early 90s?
Late 80s, early 90s, I was giving birth and then going back back on air 2 hours after birth in 1989.
That's true, isn't it? So literally you went on air and said, this is what happened this afternoon. This was in Australia, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't Billy came early, and I was heavily pregnant, and a couple of nights before, a journalist had chased. I didn't know it was a journalist, but I'd gone to put the rubbish out, bin out late at night, as you do, and somebody had I heard a car door slam, and then this person came running towards me, and I was like, bloody hell! And it had been raining, so I ran back to my front door, slipped, and fell. And I was heavily pregnant, and my then partner was away producing something else. Anyway, I I got up, got in, slammed the door, and unsurprisingly, the next day, I was talking to my girlfriend Claire, and I was like, I don't know if this is and she said, you're going into labor, you're going into labor. I said, I can't do it so early, because it was like 37 weeks and not. Anyway, I was taught an active birth where you stamp and scream and shout and everything like that. And I remember going into the hospital, and we had to lean up against the wall and go, like that, and then do all these little kids who were getting a tour of the hospital went past. They were going, hey, that's the lady from play school. What's she doing? Anyway, I gave birth in 2 hours and I went, bloody hell, I didn't ring into the newsroom. My executive producer, Deb, is going to wonder where I am. Where's the phone? And then the midwife looking at me. So I hopped up on the bed. I get the phone over and go, hey, Deb, mate, something happened. Funny thing happened on the way to the studio. So she said, oh, mate, can we send a crew over? I said, yeah, sure, send my makeover up and a crew. Now, my then partner was a producer. So we set it up. I was sitting on a rubber ring, fully made up, dressed, and we directed it. And we knew there was a price on my baby's head. I mean, newspapers had said $10,000 for the first person to get a price, a picture of this baby. So I said, this will kill that story. So we started off with a headshot with me, and I said, good evening, welcome to the 7:30 report, because it was the flagship news and current affairs program that I did every night. I said, good evening, welcome to the 7:30 report. I can only start this bulletin off with a funny thing happened on the way to the studio. Camera pan down to the baby. Billy was live on air at 2 hours old. And I said, over to Jeff in the studio, and they cut to Jeff, who actually presented the rest of the show. But what it did do is, people trying to get a photo of my newborn baby was no longer a thing. My grandmother, who lived at the time in Melbourne, the first she knew of it was a screenshot that a newspaper had taken of and me having given birth. She read about that before I got a chance to ring her. But yeah, that's what I was doing in the late 80s. But why Dusty Springfield? If I was going to be a queer woman, I know she was meant to be an absolute pain in the bum, as a person, a diva, a queen, and what have you. But if I was going to be a queer woman, I would do it for Dusty. The voice, the look, the smoky eye. Oh my God. And the song, of course, was being a news and current affairs buff, was about Christine Keeler and the whole thing. So kind of ticked a hell of a lot of boxes, this trap. And of course, the Pet Shop Boys.
Yes.
Pet Shop Boys. Oh, love it.
You were just talking about your Australian phase. Am I right in thinking that happened, you being really big in Australia, happened pretty quickly, didn't it? It kind of almost, some people said that period, because weren't you cabin crew beforehand?
I was cabin crew based in Bahrain. I do lots of things like I was cabin crew based in Bahrain, but in my holidays, I would work straight through, not take any leave, and then take it in a whole bunch. And I did training courses because I was a runner-up on Young Film Director, 2 years running, Young Film Director of the Year when I was like 14, I think, and 15. And when I was 14, I was runner-up, and along with this rather annoying young boy. It was great. He had long shorts on, and he'd done these plasticine figures, stop-start motion, right? I did a movie starring my stepdad, my dad, and my sisters, and, done a story and what have you. Anyway, he'd done these stop-start figures, and his name is Nick Parks. So Nick Parks and I were both runners up. And I remember being at Buckingham Palace once and bumping into Nick Parks, and we were reminiscing. Oh my God, who would have known we made it our jobs? And he said to me, hey, that John Craven's here. Let's go and find him. So we run around, we find John Craven, and we said, hey, do you remember us? We were both runners up. And we reminded him of Young Film Directors when we of the Year award when we went up to the BBC and got our award, and to John Craven. And we said, who won that year? And he said, oh, I can't remember. We went, exactly. It should have been us. We was robbed. But yeah, so I'd always wanted to work in television and film. And I was doing courses while I was cabin crew. And then I married my first husband, and ended up in Australia. I never expected. I mean, I ADHD, darling. And I ended up being the first Black person to front a show or really be on television in Australia. I didn't realize that. I didn't apply to be that. I was with SBS, which was the ethnic station, and I got headhunted by the ABC, which is like the BBC. And all the papers ran the story, first Black person, blah, blah, blah. And I ended up they offered me security. I mean, it brought every right-wing nasty piece of work, racist, out of the woodwork. Shock jocks on radio were basically discussing, do we want a black on our TV? And it was Mr. Parkinson, in fact, who wrote an article, I think, for the Daily Mail, saying, ridiculing the reaction to me, and that dampened everything down quite a bit. And I went on to have quite I did 7:30 Report, the flagship news and current affairs show. Before that, I'd been a senior reporter on the road for another show, News and Current Affairs. And I also did Play School. And then I created my own shows with my own production company for the ABC, and then Channel 10 over in Australia. And I've still got lots of mates there.
And you've always been somebody who's been, as well as having the TV show, helping other people with their problems, you've always been someone, as far as I can remember, watching you on TV and watching you being into, you always be so honest about your own life situations and what things have thrown at you. And that's why I thought you'd be a perfect person on Virgin Radio Pride, because you are the true meaning of an ally, really, to us. And thank you for being here and being so honest. I know this next track is particularly poignant. You told me the reason why you've picked this. This is Carly Anderson. Tell me all about this, if it's not too stressful.
Carleen Anderson, nervous breakdown, because I was having a nervous breakdown. I ended up in hospital. Load of things led to that. My then baby nearly dying, then finding out that my then husband was having an affair with my then researcher, etc., etc. But having too much on my plate, bad coping mechanisms, things in the past, yada yada yada. But I ended up having a breakdown and ended up in a psych hospital. And the feeling of when you feel or you're being told your mind has gone, it's a very scary thing. It was a really tough time. I spent 5 weeks 5.5 weeks in psychiatric hospital. It was a psychiatric nurse really that saved me, because she got a TV into my room. And I remember, I'll never forget, it was Billy Connolly discovering Scotland on a motorbike. And in my childhood, we used to go up to Scotland, Aviemore and places like Culloden on holiday. And she would talk about what was on the screen rather to me. And I was literally, I was nonverbal, and I just sat on my bed and all I did was breastfeed my baby when Maddie was brought into me. And of course, people are asking, is she a fit mother? So since 1999, I helped set up and have been patron of Home Start Norwich, which is now Home Start Norfolk. So I've been involved in early childhood and parenting charities. And you mentioned LGBTQ. I guess it wasn't I mean, the first job I had was as a costumier, would you believe, in London, and I worked. The other two people in my department were both gay. It didn't mean anything to me. It didn't. I don't know. It's funny. Then in an airline, I suppose I worked with a lot, and we're talking about the 80s when AIDS and HIV was around. And then my first husband died HIV positive, well, of AIDS. And I went through that whole scary thing of I wasn't told until I was pregnant. Well, I just had my baby, the first baby. And I remember in those days when they tested you, it was all gowns and dressed like, God, in white gloves. And I was tested and told that if I was positive, my baby was. And it was a number of weeks till you got the results.
Yeah, so I read that, it was 3 weeks until, and you really thought, I mean, it was really, you didn't know what the results were going to be. And, the backstory is your husband, who was HIV positive, was having sex with you whilst he did, I presume he knew he was HIV positive at the time.
He probably did. He probably did. But I mean, in his defense, in the 80s, not a lot was known about it. I think he was in denial. He was in denial about being gay. And here's the thing, people always say, well, don't you hate? And I was like, no, if he told, do you know what I mean? If he told me, I actually would have understood that he had more of a problem with gay people than I did. But the thing about when Carleen Anderson's hit came around, many things happened. The world in which I was most accepted and held happened to be not just the gay world, but the trans world and non-binary. In those days in Australia, I mean, they called it a non-specific gender. And a young person called Riley, I was in a nightclub because every other week my ex-partner would have the children, and I would be at a loss. And this was after I'd come out of hospital. I talked about it. I was experimenting with drugs, and ecstasy had just come out on the scene. And I go to these nightclubs and what have you. And I was kind of rescued by a little LGBT crew of trans, binary, everyone. And they used to sit on the floor and we used to discuss problems. And let me tell you, that was the origin, the beginnings of my talk show thing.
Amazing.
And a couple, one was black and one was white, two guys dancing, and I was off my face and I stood there and in 1994 going, oh, beautiful black and white, because you didn't see many black people, let alone black people with a white person, let alone a black guy with a white guy. And I was going, oh, beautiful people, beautiful. I was off my face. Q2, a bit later on, couple of weeks later, and I'm at a very wholesome street market fair in a little town called a suburb called Crow's Nest in Sydney, with my kids, and a stroller. And I never did drugs while they were around at all. It was just those weekends. Anyway, I'm all wholesome, being mummy, look, darling, face painting. And this guy in a kilt playing bagpipes with a black guy, they come up to me and they go, oh, how lovely, black guy, white guy. And I look at them again. I go, oh, my God, right? And it's this couple. And it turns out that although he was an investment banker, I think he played bagpipes at these street fairs and he was with his partner. Those two, this is 1994. He's Black American. He's a white New Zealander, has been in my lives ever since. And they are kind of my children's de facto godparents.
Wow.
They have flown to England. They have been there for my kids. My youngest kid is queer, non-binary. They have helped them through all of that. They are the couple that have been together the longest in my life, and they have been there for me. They were over here recently since 1994.
Amazing.
So,
would you like to name check them as we go into this?
I'll just say Kevin and Madison. I mean, they met my husband. In fact, he's the only husband they've ever approved of. I should have read that. There you go. But they're very, very special to me.
Trisha, if you don't mind me asking, you mentioned did you say it was your youngest who is queer non-binary? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, they are. I'm not going to identify them
No.
because they're a specialist mental health social worker in the National Health Service. They lecture on it. They're also an LGBTQI icon for the National Health Service, and they also have a career um, as a drag king. Flown to Lithuania all over, sang at my wedding, and their journey through being bullied, through their queer journey. I, as a parent, went on it. I am still learning. Their sister and I are still learning. Often slip up. They have gone from being cross with me to being understanding that I'm doing my best, as long as I am doing my best and not. And Steve, this is the thing I can't get. I mean, I know Munro Bergdorf. Um, I'm talking about people on a personal level who have shown up time and time and time again for me. I don't know why exactly. Um, my youngest thinks that I should be a lesbian. They keep pointing out periods in my life when I was definitely wearing queer clothes. I was like, and I used to say both the kids, why don't you wear a lovely dress? And they used to turn around and to me and say, why don't you? You never did. Um, no, I mean, I hate to say, do that, I'm not racist. I sat next to a black person on a bus thing. But here's the thing. I think the synergy is that I tended to be first black person on TV, first this, because my mum taught me, threw me in the garden once. I was nagging her about why I couldn't be this or that, and it was snowing, and she pushed me into this bit of snow in the garden, just gave me a bit of a shade, and she said, "There you are, nobody stepped in that snow before, and you stepped in it, you know." I always remember, just because nobody else has stood in the snow, just because it's cold and wet and slushy doesn't mean to say you've got a choice. You can stand and be safe, or you can go into the snow, explore it, fall down in it, get back up in it, but you've been there, you know? And so I think because for so many, through AIDS, and I was a patron of, I was involved in the gay and lesbian Mardi Gras march, dressed in black leather.
You did. You wore leather, didn't you, in this?
Black leather hat, bust here, Zoomers up here, the whole thing, and somebody going, "Oh, geez, I can't believe you're a play school person." It's a day.
Can we play some Chic now? Let's get into another song. I've still got so much to ask you. I know that you mentioned Chic and Nile Rodgers because you sent me a bunch of pictures with the legend. I take it you guys know each other and know each other well.
Well, we know each other. I wouldn't say well, but we know each other. He lives not far from me. I think because we both danced with the devil that is called Cancer as well. I've been up on stage with him. He's called me up on stage many times. No, I can't sing. I've been to We Are Family Foundation balls and things like that. I think I don't know. I mean, I know many of his backing singers. And I think the thing is, where he lives now in Westport. I mean, when I went to see him there, everybody assumed I was a backing singer. It's that white. But I don't know, we just clicked. Niall, and I've done loads of things with Niall, done loads of things, presented balls with him, all sorts of things. I don't know why we click. We just do click. And there it is. And I've been, as I say, I've been on stage and sung We Are Family about 1,000 times, and some other songs, I get hauled up on stage. And but he's a lovely guy. And he's so nurturing of other acts. I'm thinking like gets involved with Young Bay. He's been about, trust me, anybody he does a collaboration with, I download the single because it's going to be funky and danceable.
So the question needs to be asked, which one? I'm going to put you on the spot now. Which one do you want? It's your playlist.
Oh, God. You could do, I tell you what, he wrote for Diana Ross as well. So you could have the ultimate gay anthem, I'm Coming Out.
Oh, come on. We're going
Yeah,
to play Bob Marley next, if that's okay.
yeah. Bob Marley's got to be. Um, he's the sound, isn't he? I mean, for us, Bob Marley made it cool for me to have dreadlocks. My mother absolutely bloody hated it. I've got to tell you, she was like, dreadlocks make you look dirty. But I had dreads but because there was this thing. I mean, many West Indians of my mother's era just like country and western, so people assume that I grew up with reggae. Oh, there was one song, Ride the Donkey. I seem to remember the second line was something along the lines of "Tickle Me Plonky," but maybe we shouldn't go there. Um, but but apart from that, my mum loved Jim Reeves. I mean, hello, and The Lion Sleeps Tonight. Whoever did that, but Bob Marley. When Bob Marley came along, I both loved and hated him because everybody assumed that we smoked marijuana, we looked the same, but and when reggae came on, everybody assumed that I'd know every single word to it. But it was a big part of my life because reggae breaking onto, if you like, the white market made it okay in Britain, okay, if I can put it that way, to be black.
Mm.
Uh, any because before that, if you remember, most black artists were like your Diana Rosses, your Stevie Wonders, and what have you, Temptations. They were American, and I remember when the Jackson 5 first came on television. I'll never forget it. I was upstairs in my bedroom. I heard screaming. My mum used to call me to stop. So I ran downstairs and the Jackson 5 were on television. We were like this, you know, because they were young, funky, black, little black kids and what have you. But Bob Marley, for us, getting older and teenage, a bit more hip, it made it okay to be, and I don't think people understand what it was like growing up I had much of my childhood in East Africa, but coming back to rural Norfolk, oh my God. I mean, I had to go into therapy because of the train,
Yeah.
because of the bully, and the nastiness and being called the N word every single day and being physically beaten up while teachers stood and watched every single day, and still walking to school and to the chants of the N word and having to go through an arch of fists. And teachers, one teacher in particular, when I cried, sat me down and said, Tommy, I better toughen up because this was my life. We don't want you people here. We need to have your people are here. Remember, my mother had come over in the Windrush at the behest of one Enoch Powell, who was then works minister after the Second World War. But we were told we weren't wanted. I wasn't wanted, and I would have to. That was my life.
Wow.
If I was going to be punched every day, if I was going to be spat at, that was my life. My kids are like, why did you put up with that? Because we were the only black kids everywhere we went. Virginia Water, only black people, only black people. And we were taught all the time, be grateful. You get punched, you get spat at, you get kicked off a bus. First black girl in my school, but they put me on a pedestal. School saved me. Absolutely, I adored school. But as a teenager, yeah, Bob, and growing up, Bob Marley meant a lot to us. Richard Branson launched Virgin Australia. He needed someone famous to launch it with, and he, I think, jet skied or something, powerboated across the bit of Sydney Harbour called Darling Harbour, as it was then.
Yeah.
Got out, grabbed me, lifted me up. There's a photo somewhere of me being carried there. I lost one of my earrings. And I thought that was it. Anyway, much later on, I don't know if you got an assistant way after it, but posted one of these earrings to me. I don't know how the hell he found it because they weren't cheapy.
Yeah.
And they were like mad because I love mad earrings. But yeah, I helped launch Virgin Radio. I had him on my show. Oh, I know, because the number 2 at Virgin, the whole Virgin enterprise, because Virgin was new to Australia, that was the launch. And the number 2 there happened to be a mate of mine. And he said to his mate, oh my God, Trisha Goddard. Anyway, he did repay me more than in kind when my youngest sister um, attempted, well, and succeeded in taking her own life, and was in intensive care in Brighton Hospital with horrific burns. And I flew back from Australia, and I said, look, we need a tape to play her because she was in a coma. And I remember he got all these bands together, and it was in those days, and a tape. Invited me to the farm and the family and for barbecues, and was so good to me during that time. So he did pay it back an absolute kind. He was very, very good to me at a very, very difficult time. So I've got a lot of time for Richard. But yeah, segueing to this next track, George Michael and Careless, was George Michael. I mean, I never got to meet George Michael, but George Michael, it's funny, I never really was a big fan of Wham. Didn't do anything for me. When he went solo, I thought he was amazing. And I don't, was anybody really shocked when he came out? I don't
Well,
think anyone was. Anyone shocked? It's a bit like Philip Schofield coming out. We were like, didn't we know?
yeah.
And but he was a beautiful man and beautiful music, I think, that spoke to the time and the sound. And if you remember, his music videos really were a different set a different benchmark. The way in which they produced, because I love visuals. And George Michael, whoever made his videos right at the beginning, it wasn't just the band prancing around on stage. I'd say the other person would be Robert Palmer, who I did
Yes.
meet.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. What was he like? What was Robert Palmer like?
Listen, I've got a story to tell about that. So a magazine did this competition with all the celebs in Australia. Robert Palmer's coming out here. What would you like to ask him? And they all like, did you get off with any of the girls from, stupid questions. And I asked, what made you change from a jazz background to sort of throwing it all into basic 4/4 raw stripped back? And he said in this article, oh my God, I've got to meet this woman. This is the first sensible question I asked. So it was arranged that we meet, and somebody who became a friend of mine arranged that. At the same time, John Denver was staying in it was a very famous hotel called the Siebel Townhouse. And John Denver invited himself along. So there's me, John Denver, Robert Palmer's manager, and Gaynor, my friend. Anyway, I would have run across hot coals to get a smooch with Robert Palmer. I mean, was he not drop dead gorgeous?
Oh,
He
yes.
was the most man on planet. So we're sitting around this meal. In those days, I think you could smoke. His manager dressed and looked just like him. He's smoking like a chimney. I was like this. Robert wasn't, you never meet your idol. John Denver bored us rigid, rigid. I remember saying he'd recently spent $250,000 to go to the moon. I was wishing that the technology already existed for that to happen. It didn't go well. Don't meet you. He was gorgeous, and I would have spent the whole time, Steve, staring at him, but I couldn't see him through the smoke.
Yeah.
And John Denver just went on and on and on and on. But anyway, his videos were amazing. And at that stage, he was in the studio. And of course, Steve Lillywhite went on to produce Power Station. And I love Power Station because it was like stripped back. But George Michael was his videos to me, his visuals and vocals together were just so powerful. And I think Careless Whisper was kind of almost the start of a genre of type of video.
Quick question for you. I asked everyone this. This is Virgin Radio Pride. It's year 4, season 4. Here we are, summer 2024. Big question. What does Pride mean to you now?
Pride means, oh God, so much, so much. We imagine that everybody is included, but as I touched upon, I lived in Norfolk for a very long time. and I'm very involved in mental health charities and Mind and what have you. There are still so many young people, and I'll tell you what, with the trans debate and the fallout from the trans debate, it's raised a lot of ugly things, a lot of ugly conversation, and young people struggling with sexuality. We kind of think, oh, well, being gay, it's all right, everything's moved on. But having gone through that with a child of my own, especially in rural areas, we shouldn't confuse the acceptance of certain parts of major metropolitan areas with what it's like to be struggling with your sexuality throughout the UK.
Yeah.
And I never forget for Pride seeing way back two things. The early days of the LGBTQ, the Pride Week in Sydney in Australia, when people would lie in the streets and boo at everybody. I remember that. That was 1985. I also remember my heart, Steve, my heart going out. I was at the train station and there was a group of maybe 6 LGBTQ young people with somebody, I'm guessing, in those days, a social worker. It would have been early, maybe 2000 or two, and all excited to go on the train down to London Pride. I remember them on the platform, young people excited. And I remember hearing the remarks and the stares. And these young people, I was like, my heart went out to them because there they were excited. They'd got together. They were going to Pride, but they would still have to come back to that same area, that same stigma. So I don't think we should confuse what's happening in major metropolitan areas with the whole of Britain. So I think Pride, including trans, including non-binary, I think that's still a challenge for Pride. I do think that's still a challenge.
And one quick question before we go into your next one, which is Kate Bush running up that hill. And it's a good question to go into this. And what a great song this is. But what have we as a community, and you're very much part of this community, what have we got left to achieve?
Things have slipped back. They have. I don't care what anybody says. The acceptance we thought was there because of the conversations around trans, because of the misinformation out there. I still think I don't think we can rest on our laurels. I don't think we can at all. I think I would like to see RuPaul's Drag Race include drag kings, for instance. I'm a bit biased there. I think that we still have to achieve acceptance of those who are still excluded and whose ideas and where they come from and their struggle may be different, but still suffer the same discrimination. I do think we need to be more, easy for me to say, I know, but I still think we need to be more accepting and inclusive. And it's difficult. It's difficult, Steve. Everybody thinks, oh, if you're gay, people all have a gay friend, or my hairdresser's gay, and what have you. But let me tell you, I follow 2 dads on Instagram, and their parents who've done a bloody fantastic thing as adoptive parents. There's a lot of gay adoptive parents. And if you want to criticize adoptive parents out there, get off your own backsides and train. I trained for a year, train to be an adoptive parent. These kids need homes and they need love. But adoptive parents, same-sex couples, still have to face a hell of a lot of, out there, a lot of criticism for doing something that is literally saving children's futures. Yeah. So we can't rest on our laurels. We have to keep looking into other areas: housing, social housing, adoptive parents, foster carers. Those now we've got LGBTQI people who are going into areas that aren't cabin crew arranging flowers and hairdressing. where no, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
no, of course.
The different areas and facing that discrimination all
Yeah,
over again.
yeah.
So I don't think we can rest on our laurels.
What are you going to go for next? Come on.
The significance of Kate Bush. I like the words running up that hill.
Yeah.
And you're talking about what has the pride movement, what is to be achieved. I have a philosophy in life of hills. And that's why I like this track because I've listened to it while doing it. If you stand at the bottom of the hill and look at the top of the hill, your mind will tell you, I can't, I won't, I'm out of breath, I can't, I won't. I believe in looking at the lamppost in front of you, doing what you need to do to get there, and then going, yes, and being your own cheerleader. In other words, don't look at the whole mountain, look at steps,
It's a bit
one
by
little bit of
bit.
bit by bit, and learn to congratulate yourself and recognize what you've done. And every time you run up that hill, because there's lots of different hills, you will realize that you get out of breath later and later and later up on the hill. Let me tell you, with this cancer journey, it ain't my first rodeo, as you know, 2008, I went through it. But there are certain aspects that I can say, not all of it, there's certain aspects when I can say, ah, yeah, I know that bit. Where once upon a time I thought I'll never make it up this hill. So what I'm saying is treat every bit of every hill as a bit of training for the next hill.
Mm-hmm.
Because life goes up and it comes down, and sometimes you can freewheel down and go, whee! And sometimes you can trip up when you're going down the hill when you think you're safe. And sometimes going up that hill is the most fun thing to do. So I say you know, take each step as it comes.
I know so many people who watch us together every Saturday when I join you on your show, and so many people follow you on Instagram, and most people say to me, how is Trisha doing? And I feel so guilty because I'm always talking about Kylie and Madonna and ridiculousness. I've never actually, and I hope you don't mind me asking, how are you at the moment?
I'm not even going to tell. There's a reason, as people know, 19 months, I didn't say anything to anybody. I wore my wig because I had a wig made exactly like my hair was before.
Yeah.
And I went through the worst. I mean, I went through the morning after my wedding. They started my radiation treatment for, I think, 3.5 weeks every single day. And then I went to 4.5 months of weekly, full on, full strength chemo, which was a biatch. Upside, I got very skinny very quick. But I don't recommend it. Go for Ozempic if you can. But seriously, and I went through all of that. And I mean, sometimes I should have said doing my show. I never missed a day of work. I should have said, this has been brought to you by any number of drugs. Because cancer are not defined by cancer. How am I? I still have treatment every 3 weeks with a bit of the old chemo.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? I don't want people to be sorry for me. I'm very fortunate that I have access to the healthcare I have, and there's no waiting list over here. Uh, I'm just kind of me, and it's a new normal. I've learned I had to learn how to walk again. Um, there's certain foods I can't eat because I don't have enough to swallow. I put cream on every day because I get this awful rash from the drugs. I have limited fingers. I'm getting acupuncture, so I've got a bit of stuff in my fingers again. My eyesight, one eye muscles kind of went, so I see double, so I have corrected glasses. And it's a hill, but I go up a little bit and I discover, oh, I can get help to get up the next bit of the hill. I'll take every drug, I'll take everything that they give at me. And I'm very fortunate. I grew up in East Africa. People die of a flipping common cold there, so I'm fortunate. I'm in the West. I have finally a good husband. I have I've got an
Tell me,
amazing
tell me
husband.
about him, Trisha.
Um, Wow. When we met, a very weird thing. We were both just like literally table fillers at some horse riding do. We'd been invited by the person who bought the table, spent all this money, had two spare seats. He was invited, I was invited. We're sitting next to each other going, while we're here. Um, and I said, like, how many times have you been married? Because at this age, if you're single, um, I went, how many times have you been married? How many times have you been married? So I said to him, I told him, at that stage, I've been married. I've been married 3 times. No, 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 no. And he said, um, I've been married. He said, I've been married twice, widowed once, divorced once, widowed once. And I looked at him and don't ask me how now. I said to him, did your late wife die of breast cancer? And he looked at me and he said, yeah, and we knew nothing about each other. He said, you had breast cancer, didn't you? We could just tell. We could just tell.
Amazing.
And he'd been a single parent. I'd been a single parent. He brought up 2 children on his own, didn't get together with anyone until they were in their 20s, sort of the late teens, 20s. He'd been to the mountain. I'd been to the mountain. We both lived. We both got stories to tell.
Yeah.
And Steve, we laugh. We laugh. Katrina, in a way, is walking on side. I think I had her on my show, one of my talk shows. Most people do come on at some stage. But I tell you why I like this, Walking on Sunshine. Is it not the best up song when you feel like poo?
It
Don't
really
you
is.
think
As
so?
soon as those drums kick in, it doesn't matter what the weather is, it is sunnier, isn't it?
It is. I just got really sensible. And well, no, I've always been really sensible. I've had sensible cars to cart children or people or pets around. I had Range Rovers, then I downsized to minis. My first car was a mini, which I killed, but that's another story. Um, so I bought I always had mini Countrymans, which are the sort of estate versions, because I could get the shopping in, pick the children up from the airport. And then once I was diagnosed this time round, last time I was diagnosed in 2008, I went, I remember I was sitting in my then Jag convertible at the traffic lights. I never forget that, going to the hospital for something. And I thought, and Katrina and the Waves, Walking on Sunshine came on. And it was a gorgeous sunny day. The top was down. And I thought, here am I. I've got everything. I've got the car. I've got the traffic, yeah, everything. And I don't know whether I'm going to live or die. At that stage, I didn't know whether I was going to live or die. Katrina and the Sunshines came on my playlist, came up. And I thought, expletive word, if I'm going to die, I'm going to have that. I'm going to have convertibles. I'm going to have the time of my life, right? And this time around, and then I got a Maserati convertible. I went a bit nuts. But this time around, I had sensible cars. And I remember that moment. And I said, you know what? I'm going to get a convertible mini. So this comes on my sun. And now it's been hot here and the roof down. And it's on my playlist, Walking on Sunshine. And it really does feel like, you know what? When the sun comes out, and I can't take a lot of sun now, that's another side effect of my treatment. But when the sun comes out, don't you think it can make the saddest things look a little bit better? And if you're really sad when it's sunny, it makes you even sadder. But I love sunshine and I love rain. I love the opposites, right? But I picked this because it's my convertible car song. Doesn't that sound bourgeois?
It
Sounds a bit bourgeois.
I want to be in
Should I
that car with you listening to this.
There's not a lot of room, but yeah, that's a mini. But yeah, it is. It is. It's just one of those moments. And one of the things I've learned, if nothing else, through life and this, is grab each moment that is. I've been in the pits of sadness and despair, and something absolutely bloody stupid has happened, or I've seen something absolutely stupid that's happened. Grab the moment and laugh.
How would you like to be remembered?
for resilience, I think. Um, for saying poo happens, it's what you do with it. Roll around and get smelly, or plant it and grow roses. Um, so I'd like to be remembered. She came, she saw, and she waded through a lot of poo. Uh, I think, I don't know. I really don't know. It's up to other people how they think of me. And you can't change how people think of you. Um, you can do the best you can. I hope people would recognize my passion uh, for the rights of people with mental health issues and mental illness. I really do. I've worked really hard on that. Now I'm trying to work at, I think the mental health of people with chronic illnesses is often overlooked. And so that's my latest thing. I hope people remember me for the work that I've done with Home Start, the parenting charity. Um, and that the first years and early years, how important that is to us. Adoptive parents care and people who look after children. I don't know, Steve. I don't know. It's I just she came, she saw, and she waded through poo. I think that would make quite a good t-shirt slogan.
It's a book as well, waiting to happen.
And if you have brushes with death, I'm serious now. If you have brushes with death, and many of us have, I don't just mean with illness. I mean the crash landing of the plane I was in. Yeah, I put myself in situations where I've had brushes with death. I've had people during those times reach out a hand to me, and I think we mentioned many people from the LGBTQ world were the first people I could admit I was struggling, and the first people to say, we know what struggle's like and we're with you. At those times of strength when you ask for help, and you sometimes have to keep asking for help, you will meet amazing people. They may come and go, but they will feed your spirit. And I think brushes with death or uncertainty of the future, if you allow them to, they can teach you and help you to live, not scuttle in the undergrowth, live. We have one life to live. Would you rather talk about the sunshine, the rain, the wind, the sleet in your face, or just describe a life of scuttling along in the hedgerows? To me, if I'm on this planet but once, I want to try everything, Steve. I want to see everything. I do that on my show. I'm selfish. I interview people about orca whales and what's happening in Gaza, usually peace movements, because I studied conflict resolution, Jewish people and Muslim people who stand together, people who do extraordinary things, AI. I'm naturally curious about life and people. And there's more good in this world than bad. And I think we as journalists, we in the media, often do a very poor job of highlighting the good. And we tend to feed fear through a want of clickbaits and money, basically. Which is why I love talking to you on a Saturday, because showbiz and what happens out there is a big part of everyone's lives. And it's usually fun and uplifting, and the arts speak to us in a way that other things can't. And I think there needs to be more of it.
You sent me a message in the week, and it was actually a screenshot on WhatsApp, wasn't it? Heather Small's following you. So tell me, this is a perfect song to play out. You've been the most fantastic guest, Trisha. Thank you for doing my Pride playlist. But moving on up, over to you. Why do you want this?
Again, this is a song, and I can't believe that Heather Small is following me. I mean, I skated on Dancing on Ice to Pride, and what have you done? There you go, Pride, and what have you done? But moving on up, at pooey times of my life, I think when you're down, there's just one way to go. That was Robbie Neville, so say la vie. When you're down, there's just one way to go. And I always think, if I feel at a bit of a rock bottom, there's, but the other part of it is, and I'd say that to anyone listening, there's only one way you can go, and that's up. And remember that hill. Moving on up might just be to the next lamppost, but you are moving on up. Virgin Radio.